What's up, my brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Fireground Fitness Podcast, where we talk about all things pertaining to life on and off the fireground. The views and the opinions expressed are those of your host and our guest. Today, we sit down with retired Fire Chief Tom Jenkins. We talk about all things leadership, his 15 years as a fire chief, lessons he's learned, and we close out talking about the NERIS project and how we can be more data informed in our business. It's a great podcast. I hope you enjoy. Tom, thank you so much first of all, I'm super thrilled that you're here in Arizona. I have an opportunity to sit down and rap. And we've had the chance to talk briefly before, but this will be a chance to really, spend a little bit more time. So tell the audience a little bit about who you are and where you come from. And
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, it's good to be in Arizona, and it's always a pleasure to be in Maricopa County. We've got a lot of good fire departments down here, a lot to learn. I'm Tom Jenkins. I just retired.
Yes, congratulations.
That was cool.
That's awesome.
Doesn't seem possible. You always talk to people. I remember being like a kid hanging around fire stations, and you just thought like you never.
Well,
retirement's like an enigma.
And you were retired for all of what? Like
zero
week or something, maybe.
I was negative. I was, I was not retired at all, actually, but I retired 100, and I guess it'd be about 150 days ago from the city of Rogers, Arkansas. So that's actually kind of a similar community to where you work. Fast growing, very affluent, cool place to be a fire chief and be a firefighter. And so I had the privilege working there as a chief for 15 years, which, it's pretty impressive, in dog years anyway.
That's a long run.
That's a good run as a chief. Yeah. It was, and it was a lot of fun. You don't find too many chiefs that at the end of it, I don't know that I'd want to do it twice. I wouldn't want to do it 30 years, right? But if I had a rewind button, I'd do it all over again. It was a good time, good department, got to meet a lot of good people, solve problems. Always felt like we had the ability to serve. I know that sounds kind of goofy, but we got to make the community safer. We did it.
Well, yeah. Is that the thing? It feels like it's trite because that's what we all talk about all the time. But, to look back and say, hey, we actually had an impact. That's amazing.
It's kind of weird. And you'll appreciate this being a former Phoenix firefighter is that this is my perception, because there was a time in my life where I thought, major metro is where it's at.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of very talented people working in major metropolitan cities. No criticism there to their career path. But what I find in interaction with, multitudes of colleagues that work in metro cities is, it's like steering an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Like if you really want to, you're making the community safe, right? But you're not able to make the kind of transformational change across the board very easily. Just to keep your job in a major med is difficult these days. It's hyper political, and you don't want to be in too small of a community where you lack the resources, you lack the diversity of risk to really understand the complexity of things that we do. And so I really found like where the porridge is just right is in the city I ended up working. I remember when I first got there, I thought, I'm going to do a few years, I'll get vested, and I'll move on. And then I kind of fell in love with the community, and then I saw like, wow, like we're doing some cool stuff here that are, things that anybody can take and learn from. And so, yeah, what a wonderful experience. So,
well, I have some questions about some of the things that you accomplished and how you did it. But before we go there, let's talk about kind of how you got to that place in your career. So you ended up doing a total of what, 26 years?
26 years, spot on.
So how did you, well, first of all, like, where'd you come up?
I came up I started as a volunteer. I'm an Oklahoman. Started as a volunteer and actually always worked in the suburbs of Tulsa. And
is that where you were born and raised?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of
I'm
riding a bike boy. Around in the
mm-hmm. I was a Tulsa boy and loved it over there. I still do. I'm still, in many, I don't live in Oklahoma. It's kind of one of those states you gain some kind of weird affinity for, and not scared of tornadoes. And so, came up there as a volunteer, worked there, and then had an opportunity to become a deputy chief in other side of the suburbs of Tulsa, and then and from there I was given an opportunity to go in chief in Rogers and move out of state, and just really have had nothing but blessings in my career. Like I just ran across the right people. You know, I guess I always thought I've been very focused on my career. Love the fire service, like from the bottom of my heart. But at the same time, I recognize that, you know, my level of education in the fire service, my level of commitment to the fire service matters very little in comparison to the amount of people who have influenced me, like just meeting people at the right time, learning from people that were much more streetwise and that sort of thing than I was. And like, man, it's great.
Well, so let's talk about that for a second, because as a line firefighter, right, which I think the bulk of people listening to this are probably at that, you know, on the line, and they're thinking about, I'm going to put a thought in their head. They're thinking about their careers, right?
Okay.
And you talk about how important it is what I heard what you said was how important it is to have the relationships. So how do you foster and nurture the healthy relationships to feed your career and pour into your career?
You know, some of that's just luck. I'll tell you a couple of observations I have. One is that I think that we're very fortunate in the current environment that the fire service operates in, that there's a plethora of opportunities to gain like formal education and knowledge, more certificates and, you know, credentials out there than ever have been available.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think we kind of create an environment where, you know, congratulations on your certificate, right? But you still have to be able to do the work, right? You have to be able to connect with people. You have to be able to communicate. You can't be an asshole. And we don't always teach those lessons. Those lessons are taught around the kitchen table with the right. And I actually had a high school teacher, believe it or not, that said, he said, you need to get experience as cheaply as possible. Like, get experience. And so I think that there's some very fine line you have to walk in gaining those relationships, where we can't be dismissive of the lessons of people that don't offer us a certificate to go on the wall or a little credential to wear on our, you know, dress uniform. And, you know, and those lessons come in different forms. Like some of the better, you know, blessings I've had in terms of lessons have come from firefighters and officers that were screw ups in their own right? Like I loved them, learned a lot from them. And of course there's the good ones too.
Yeah. I think about the dynamic in the firehouse. You have, you know, so many different types of people, you know, and I heard someone say once, you know, oh dang it, what was that stupid quote? Something along the lines of, no man is useless, he can always serve as a bad example. Or something like that.
Spot on.
But, you know, you talk about learning from all the people. So I think that, but as an individual, you have to be a keen observer and a strong listener. And I think that's a valuable skill anywhere.
Amen. I mean, and it's even recognizing, I've seen people even be boxed in by mentors. Like you get really good examples, and eventually, like you kind of hit all sides of, you know, whatever that person is offering you, and they kind of fail to grow and realize that you can develop. You don't have to be a recreation of that person that you want to emulate. Like they would want you to exceed,
right?
You know, their capabilities and that sort of stuff. But it's always funny to me. Years ago, I was helping out with a manual on fire service mentorship, and I always thought it was a little comical that, you know, we're writing a manual on mentorship. You can't prescribe those things. Right? I can't stick somebody with you and say mentor them. That's just, I think it's been alive and well in the fire service ever since it's, you know, we've had the fire service.
Right. Well, I think you're right. Mentorship is very organic. What's very interesting to me, though, is that I've often heard firefighters say, I probably even said it myself at some point, that the organization needs to put together a mentorship program. And I'm always racking my brain going, what does that even look like?
I don't know. I wrote that manual. And don't get me wrong, there's some great nuggets in that was a collaborative effort. But there's some good stuff in there.
Right.
But those relationships have to happen organically.
Yeah.
And like I always gravitated towards people that were totally different than me. Like you know, I'm a little bit, you know, of a guy who's probably a little bit more logical and rational, and I always kind of like to be around people who, you know, maybe were a little different, right? I could learn something.
Challenge your rigidity.
Yeah, you know, just it was good in the fires, and it's. I agree with you. It's like you have to encourage mentorship. We have to support it. We have to have all those things necessary to catalyze it when it naturally occurs, but I think it has to naturally occur. I don't think that the department can prescribe that, or at least not I've ever seen.
Well, and I think that the only prescription I would give is that leaders need to say, I will be a mentor, right? And go out there and seek people to develop. Who are the people in your organization that are going to come up, and who are the people that are developing, that are reaching out for relationships and trying to develop themselves? Feed those people. That's the prescription. But then also, as a line firefighter, if you want to grow and develop, you got to seek it out. So I distinctly remember a point in my career when I'm like, oh, it's my responsibility. And I went to one of my guys that I consider a mentor, and I said, hey, dude, I am ready. And he was like, no, you are not. And I said, hold on. And I got really uppity, and I said, I'm going to push back on you here. Why am I not ready? And he cited, things that were sort of intangible, organizational appearances and things like that. And I said, I can't control any of that. So it is what it is. So I need you to help me move down this path. And he's like, oh, all right. I guess you are ready. I'm like, okay. And then he opened some doors for me and kicked me through them, and it was fantastic. But it took me going to him and saying, hey, I need to rip the Band-Aid off and move forward here. Because not everyone's always going to see what you see in yourself, or maybe if you see talent in somebody, you got to identify it for them. Help that person understand that there's more going on there.
No, you're right. And we kind of, as an industry, I think we generally suck at that. We don't do a good job of saying like, hey, you got it in you.
Yeah.
Like you've got some potential.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the paramilitary culture. I don't know if that's the bravado of the fire. And there's plenty of exceptions. I always just, even with like physical fitness, I found myself as I got older being like, we need to when I see women and men on the fire department that are doing good and taking care of themselves as they advance in their career, I'm going to be the first to point that out and say, man, you're doing good. I can tell you're trying to take care of yourself. Kudos to you. Yeah. Because I remember a lot of people who didn't. And I think in a similar vein, we have to recognize those people that were top performers. And my last few years as chief, and it probably was related to the fact that I knew I was closer to the end than the beginning. But I'd haul people into my office. Like anybody can test and, try to jump through the ranks. I encourage them to do it. But when I was seeing people, that it was just obvious to me that they had the ingredients necessary to be a leader, I thought, man, rather than assume everybody else is telling them, rather than assume that they're going to have some epiphany and the clouds are going to part and they're going to understand they need to promote, I'm going to take the time to bring them in and tell them that. And oftentimes I was met with people who were already motivated to promote, had clearly been told that before, but every now and then, like 1 out of 10 was like, holy shit, this is altering to my current trajectory. I was super interested in, mowing yards on my days off, and I was starting to look for another career. Yeah. It's every now and then I would get some response where I was like, holy shit, I am really glad I took the time and effort to communicate with this person, which I don't know, maybe organizations do that better than I realize, but I don't think they do.
Yeah. No, I mean, we talk about it so much. I think organizational development is a thing that has to be deliberate. And I think that it's talked about enough in private sector, et cetera, that it's not intuitive. I think people are very focused on their mission and their skill set and the work that they have to do, which leaves little time structurally to go and find people to be pulling in and pulling up, which I think is obviously is a missed opportunity. But when you're the fire chief, how much time do you really have to do that? I think it has to be a very deliberate, planned part of your day, if you will.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I felt, I don't know, the longer, I guess being a fire chief, I see like a ton more parallels to being a parent. It took me a long time to realize, like, holy crap, this is really similar. But I did notice that the longer I did it, that you begin to learn things that they're not difficult lessons, right? Like take the time to tell people that, man, if they keep the accelerator down, they're going to make big time changes to the job, that they have the potential to really change the fire service, whether that's local, regional, state level, national. And, it's an easy lesson. And I think if there's anything that we could offer some criticism, you flip through, chief officer handbook, you flip through curriculum, like we don't really talk about we don't really talk about some of this, some of these soft skills that really cultivate future leaders. And I certainly did not have it right, but I just found it almost embarrassing that, like, what was I doing the first 10 years? Like just assuming, that everybody's going to get the message. I don't know. It was crazy.
Isn't that an interesting thing, though, that leaders grow as they exercise leadership? Mm-hmm. I mean, some do. I mean, some don't. But
plenty of examples both ways.
But there's an opportunity there because you're right. It's not something that is intuitive, and it's not necessarily something that you are taught directly. Well, so what are some other, since we're talking about indirect lessons, what are some other indirect things that you point back and you go, oh, that's something I learned the hard way?
I had a mentor of mine was, he was a district chief in the city of Tulsa. He actually went on to become a fire chief in a smaller community out of state. And he used to always say, and he may have stolen this quote, by the way, but I always credited him. He said, all good leaders walk with a limp. And I thought, man, I didn't understand.
I heard that before. I like it.
Yeah, it's like everybody's going to have a hunk of their butt, taken at some point in time, and because it's kind of to yours. Like you develop, like you kind of have to screw up. Like if you have somebody who's chiefing for any amount of time, or it doesn't have to be chiefing, company officer, and they don't screw up, not intentional, not malicious, you're going to have to screw up in order to learn some lessons, learn how to recover. I mean, when you get this thing in a stall or a spin and you got to, get it back on a good track. And that was, that's another one out there that's just always stuck with me, that there's airs of enthusiasm, and then there's like airs of a malicious nature. And when you have people that are trying to do the job, trying to make it better, trying to take care of their people, and they screw up, like we got to be able to know the difference between the two. And that's an inexact science too, for sure.
Yep. No, I think I really love this idea of, you talk to entrepreneurs who are talking about fail fast, right? Like if you are pushing the threshold, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. You're getting after it. You're challenging maybe the current paradigm, and you're pushing into some things. You're going to make some mistakes and maybe step on a landmine or two.
Amen.
Right? And that's okay when it's done. How did you say it? What was it? Not with righteousness, but you said with enthusiasm, right? It's an error of enthusiasm. You just moved a little too fast. You didn't quite think it through, and maybe you stepped on something or stepped in it. Yeah. But this idea that the person who's overly cautious and is analyzing everything to death and then never does anything interesting or never moves the needle in any way, shape, or form is never going to make a mistake, but they're never going to do anything either.
My favorite company officers that ever worked for me were the ones that were always... They'd oftentimes piss people off between them and me, like their battalion chiefs would be a little frictiony with them, and even the deputy, you could just tell they'd push the envelope. But it's like, if I could kind of bring back the lens a little bit and go, these are people who are doing things because they're wanting to jump a run. They're just wanting to do things that are clearly serving the public, being aggressive, taking care of those people that need us in time-sensitive, life-threatening situations. Like, if that's our worst problem with this, guy or gal, we don't have any problems. There's a lot of problems in the fire department, but people who want to work, people who want to make a difference, it's not going to get on my list. Right. I'm not saying it's, not allowed to irritate other people, but, it's just, it's a different day and age, and I just love to see people who, embrace the job and love to work, just like I always felt I did.
Yeah. Well, so we jumped ahead in your career all the way up. So the first, you became a fire chief pretty young in your career.
I was 27 years old.
Holy crap. Wow.
I look back on it too.
Just a baby.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I had a lady call me when I was I was a few years in. I probably actually knew what I was doing by then. And
so how old were you when you got on the job?
I was 16 as a volunteer, 18 working. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah. I've been very blessed. But
so let me ask you this. What was it that gave you the cojones to take on that challenge? Or what were some of the natural skills that you had that allowed you to kind of accelerate to that level so quickly?
Hey,
what do you think?
I think,
and don't be all humble on me.
I don't think you'd have to get Jake or somebody in here to tell you the truth. Yeah, I look back and I think it was pretty stupid. Ultimately, it was a strong mayor form of government, and I was working I was a deputy at the time, and I was, what would be the word? I was just frustrated where I was at. Right, I was in a good suburb that lacked a lot of the resources necessary to do some of the cool things it needed to do. It was a great place to work. Loved the firefighters I worked with. And, I was shopping a little bit, and I had an opportunity to go work in Rogers, and the mayor at the time, who now is the congressman for the 3rd Congressional District, just went out on a limb. And, I think he was, by the time he figured out how old I was, I think he was,
You'd already sold him a bill of goods.
Like, what the hell? But he's already in by then. It was crazy. It was an opportunity of a lifetime, but it also, I guess I had just enough ego to think I could do it.
Yeah.
And you never know, right? It worked out. I made it.
Yeah.
It worked out. And I had, I was divorced. I had all these ingredients to just pour my soul into the organization. But I had just enough ignorance to understand, like, I knew that I didn't have enough gray hair then. Like, I just didn't have enough gray hair. And so you've seen this in your career. There's no doubt about it. If you promote quick and you promote early, then you're faced with a fork in the road. You're either going to pretend you have experience that you don't, and you will find plenty of those people who will fake it until they make it, or whatever the saying is.
Yeah.
Or you have to be cognizant enough to, maintain some value of self-worth. Like, I'm still the fire chief. Like, this rises and falls with me.
Yeah.
It's my butt on the line if we do something stupid. But I'm going to have to defer to people who have more gray hair, just more time on the job than I do. And it doesn't, do they make the decision? No, but I'm going to have to consult with them. And I guess that goes a little bit against the paramilitary culture that we try to promote. But, I'll be damned. It worked out all right for me.
I'll tell you what, though, when you talk paramilitary, so I don't know if you know this about me. I was a Marine. I talk about it all the time. I brag about it all the time. But what I think about when you bring that up, the military model, you have the enlisted ranks, right, which are like your line firefighters that salty backseat firefighter who's been there for 20 years in the backseat. And then you get this young company officer who comes in. And in the military, the equivalent is like these brand new lieutenants fresh out of college, right? And then they can become like the company officer equivalent, or like what would be like a fire chief is, a battalion commander, pretty young. Mm-hmm. And then they have these salty senior enlisted folks who've been around, who've seen some things, done some things, and these young officers who are book smart and academics, but don't necessarily have any real experience, not in life or in the service. So I think that's kind of akin to what you're describing, and, the thing that you said that I thought was really important there was you talk about subjugating your ego. Right, setting aside your ego so that so that you can listen to those people who have the experience and have been down the road, and you gather their information so that you can make a high quality decision, at least one that's somewhat well informed. Right.
Absolutely, and along the way you make some friends there.
Right.
Before I took the job, I ended up talking to some of I asked that mayor at the time, I said, I want to talk to some of the guys who are getting ready to retire before I'll say yes. Like, I want to find out about what's in the closet here.
Yep.
And,
good move.
And it worked out that, when you engage some of those folks who are long in the tooth and have plenty of gray hair, like, and you let them know that you value their opinion, that you're not always going to listen to it. Sometimes you just need another perspective, and que sera, but man, I made some friends. They were there I had a bunch of them at my retirement.
That's awesome.
I guess it worked out. Yeah, it's tough. It's just, leadership is, you can read as many manuals and have as many certificates as you want, but it's an inexact science. And I'm so thankful I had that opportunity.
Yeah. What I heard in what you were saying was listening, right? And I think when you are listening to people, asking their opinion and soliciting their input into the decision-making process, you're going to build credibility, and you're going to build relationships with people. Mm-hmm. They think you care about them. You care, and if you do it sincerely, obviously, if you're going in there with a line of bull crap, they're going to smell that right away. Yeah, firefighters are fantastic at that. So, well, let me ask you this: when you look back at the course of your career, what are some of the things that or one or two things that stand out to you as one of the most pivotal or challenging times that you faced?
There's no shortage. It's tough to trend down. I think that, what I really, if I look back on 15 years, I will tell people that in the 15 years I was chief, that's I think the least fun job in the fire department. That's just a difficult job. But at the same time, I never, except for maybe 2 weeks cumulative total, had anything but fun. I think that, we had certainly our fair share of incidents related to, of a federally declared disaster scale. And I remember when COVID hit, that was so frightening early on. I mean, it kind of changed as it went on and seemed a little less ominous, but that was one of the few times I remember being scared, because nobody seemed to know what the hell was going on or what we needed to do. But I think when you really boil it down, the toughest stuff is the people, right? It was the challenges in workforce the last probably 5 or 6 years, watching the dwindling number of candidates, and of the dwindling number of candidates, it seemed like the quality of candidates was just more and more difficult to cultivate out there. That really was difficult. And even, some of the good women and men that joined, that had the resume to do great. It seemed, I don't have any way to prove it, but it sure did seem that the level of commitment to the job was different. Like they didn't love it like I did. Not all of them. There was exceptions. I mean, there were exceptions and people that it was obvious it was burning inside their heart. But that worried me. It was and I think it's a crisis nationwide, actually.
Yeah. What do you think's leading to that? Because I think there's 2 pieces to that. There's a recruitment problem and there's a retention problem.
Amen.
And I think they're connected to a degree. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts on it?
I could go. I was in New York back in November talking on recruitment and retention challenges for career firefighters, and it seems like everybody that is in some age range that's near mine, has some story about, like, when I got on the fire department, it was ultra competitive. When I got on the fire department, I remember being told when I was a kid, hanging around fire stations, like, Tommy, nobody quits the fire department. Anybody that quits the fire department? I remember this was told to me by a district chief. I was probably 11, and he said anybody that quits fire department is crazy, clinically crazy. Like, if you quit before you reach retirement age, something's wrong with you. And there had been some firefighter in some city that had gone on some shooting spree and left at 10 years, and he was like, "I told you so. I told you. If you leave the fire department early, I guess you're really crazy." And so that was his evidence, and so it was just weird. It's just at some point in time, maybe you did too, I missed a pivot where it to some became more of an occupation.
Yeah.
And I think, and you're always going to have, they had those 50 years ago, but it does seem like there's a growing number of people who it's very me oriented, and you got to pay a good salary for an honest day's work. You got to have good bennies. You want to have good working conditions, safe stuff, all the equipment, reduce the cancer every time you can. Like, you want all those things to take care of your firefighters. No fire chief or anybody that's a decision maker wouldn't support those things. But it also takes firefighters who know how to be tough, who know how to show up. And I don't know. I don't know what's contributing to it, but I know I witnessed a lot of the evidence of the problem.
There is definitely a change, and we're seeing those numbers. I mean, the numbers are very obvious. We see this significant change. Right now, we're doing we call it the 5 and under study. So we're talking to firefighters that have 5 years or less on the job, trying to understand what's influencing them, influencing their friends. Why aren't their friends showing up to the job? And my cursory results, if you will, that we've heard so far are things like health and wellness, right? The risk versus reward, and of course you always hear, hey, pay and benefits aren't commensurate to the risk that people are taking, and so there's that, there's a dynamic there that's tough, and you'll hear people say, well, hey man, the smoke eaters, they're like, hey, if you want to do this job, do this job. If you don't want to do this job, pack your bags, beat it. That's as an organization that's trying to sustain service to the community, at a certain point, you got to, where are you going to get these high quality people to provide service?
Dude, that's the problem though, is like, you used to be able to say, like, hey, if I remember people saying things like, you can fit in or fit out. Like, this is the fire department.
Right.
Fit in or fit out, because there was a line out the door.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And now there's no line.
Right. A line out the door of highly qualified people. Right. And that's, yeah. Yeah. Who's it said, you volunteered twice to get on this job, wants to take the test and then wants to leave. Everything in between is obligatory. Like, you've got to come and do the work. And which is interesting, because you get these firefighters who are like, well, I'm not interested in training today. And, like, nah. And I'm like, or I'm done running calls. Like, they get so burned out with the calls. And I'm like, that's the job, period. Like, you can be tired running calls, but hey man, that's what we're here for. So that's it's tough when you hear that, because people are getting frustrated for whatever reason. Maybe they were sold a bill of goods. So that's the other thing, is you get guys who come on this job, guys and gals, folks, people who come on this job, and they expect that they're going to be kicking doors every day. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that it's largely EMS. It's largely service delivery. And so I guess as an organization, are we sending the wrong message in our recruitment packages and things like that? Are we telling people that what this job isn't real?
I mean, probably.
Not fully honest?
I think that I've asserted that too. I did so yes, I think that we do not have complete honesty in our marketing. Lifting somebody off the toilet at 3 a.m., probably not the sexiest of brochure covers, but I think, or maybe it is, I don't know. But I did a similar study when I really began. We were getting ready to open a fire station, and it was our 8th station. We were hiring for it, and I remember our numbers were just like embarrassingly low. I mean, where you're talking about dropping standards, and that didn't feel right. That's not the right thing to do if you can avoid it anyway. And so I really started diving into it after that, looking at retention rates, measuring them, like what contributed, and I would follow some people like when they left, right, and just kind of say like, hey, not in a very open and honest level of communication, and I believe in my heart that I got good answers. I saw almost no pattern in people leaving. There were always those people who felt like they could make more money. Of course, if you join the fire department to make money, like, I don't know, that's the wisest decision to begin with. But you'd have those. You'd have like a variety of reasons. But I would see people leave because they were lonely. They didn't have any friends. Not even making that up. I saw people leave. A lot of people leave for that work-life balance. I think that the 3 platoon system is an endangered species. I think that if there's a marketing thing we can do, it's probably a better, I think 4 platoon systems are where it's at, and there's some in the country, but there are not a ton. But if I had a magic wand or, a genie with 3 wishes, I would allocate some number of effort to mandate that our fire stations stop looking like hotels. That, we were all private bedrooms. Which is good. There's, you got women in the fire, so people who want that privacy. If cold and flu season, it's great to be able to segregate those people. People that snore, it's wonderful not to hear them. But that was ingredient number 1 that probably has helped contribute to this crisis. My opinion. Ingredient 2 is sitting in front of you and sitting in front of me. It's our cell phones. That everybody appears to kind of alienate themselves a little bit more than they used to. And, I can find myself too addicted to it, but I mean, I could walk into fire stations, and it changed even in 15 years, where I would walk into fire stations and the firefighters, old and young. It used to be that, you'd complain about the younger ones. It was everybody they were on devices. Nothing. I mean, that's okay to some degree, but I think if I had one wish, I would say you got to cook, you got to eat dinner. You got to eat lunch together. That it just seemed that, like, with all these different diets, and it would just became so cool to be an individual, right? And individuality is great, but we're in a team business, and so some balance, right? Some middle ground where it's like, what can we be doing to program team? And the best time you ever had in your career. I don't know this about you, but I'm gonna predict best time you ever had in your career was the place you worked with the most fun people, right? With a boss who supported you, a captain who supported you, where you balance fun, hard work. You knew how to get it on when it's time to get it on. You knew how to have fun when it's time to have fun. And man, if I could get those into all of our fire stations, we'd be okay. Like we would at least control the retention problem. And once you control that, you control the recruitment problem a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the retention piece is people need to feel connected. And if everyone comes to work and it's a race to the Stratos, and then we're in the Strato loungers playing on our phones, that's your recipe for disaster, because you're not building connection. You're not building interoperability with one another, right? You're waiting for the tones to drop, and then you're going to go build connection. That's got to come first. So like, you need to be training every tour, and whether it's laying canvas or working on door props or running through EMS scenarios, but the phones are away and you're together working on something. Like back in the day when guys would go out in the bay and work on motors and do projects together, like that stuff's important. One of the threads in my career was a long tour at a tiny little single company station where every day we'd go out in the gym together and spend hours in this horrible apparatus bay gym, which you can imagine in Phoenix is hotter than Hades in the summer. You'd go out there and burn your hands on the barbells and stuff. Like, it was stupid. But we would spend this time together and do these workouts together, which is kind of where Fireground Fitness was born, actually. And that was time of bonding and connecting, and then so I was the recreation director, and my counterpart was the training director. And so we would go out and drill, and then we'd go into the gym and PT all day, and then we would cook. And this was not before cell phones, but it was kind of on the cusp of them becoming a problem. But we were fully engaged with one another, doing all kinds of stuff and activities. And yeah, we could have hard conversations about politics and stuff because we trusted one another. You build that interactivity. But if you're not putting any time in with one another, it's no wonder that we have such a problem with lawsuits and stuff in the fire service. It was I had Mark Robbins on here, and he's a former fire chief, and that is a lawyer as well, and he does a lot of stuff with the fire service. And he says our number one problem in the fire service is not customer service issues; it's internal. Firefighters suing fire departments and firefighters suing firefighters. Well, why is that? It's because this disintegration of that relationship, the trust and the camaraderie.
No, you're right. And I think you were spot on earlier. There was a comment you made, and when I looked at our data, it was like an 81%. I think we were looking at a 7-year mark. It was an 81% 7-year retention for people that eventually showed some evidence of belonging, like joining a special team, going to paramedic school, promoting. It was like once they dug in, they stayed. And so the question, you got to take it one step further, right? How do you get upstream of, like, once they dug in, how do you get them to dig in? Well, I think you get them to dig in by what you're saying, right? You make them feel like they're part of the family. Yeah. And there's no secret ingredient for that. I know that that's all intangible stuff, but it's not in the company officer manual, right? It doesn't say, like, how do you take a bunch of firefighters who a bunch of, everybody's a mutt, right? Nobody's a pure breed in the fire department, it doesn't seem. How do you take them together and you turn it into, one heck of a band, and easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, but it takes deliberate engagement. I think it's, you can't just come in and crash on the couch. You got to get in there and do something. And I think about this idea, like, company officers need to learn how to self-assess and how to assess their company, and then figure out what your individual folks need to be successful, and then provide it. Right? If you have an engineer, or you have a backseat firefighter who's going to move up out of class periodically, even for short periods of time, train that guy so that he can do that successfully, and he'll feel this connection as you're pouring this information into him, right? Like, that's what has to happen. And I think that that's true at all levels in the organization, but it starts in the firehouse, right? It starts at that family level, right? Where we're taking the backseat firefighter, the senior backseat firefighters, turning to the other guy and saying, hey, what do you want to train on today? What do you think you need? And then honest self-assessment, and then go out and do it.
Amen.
Get the sets and reps.
Most important job in the fire department certainly is not the fire chief. Certainly is not the one running the shift or the battalion district. It's that company officer. You find me good company officers, I have no problems.
Yeah,
as a fire chief.
I say it all the time. I say, hey, the fire chief can stand on top of admin and wave their tiny little fists and demand things get done. But until the company officer makes it so, nothing's going to happen.
Amen.
They are the pivotal employee in the organization. So it's really critical that it just makes me feel anxious because I'm like, we got to get our company officers and help them be successful because they're the cornerstone of the organization.
Yeah. And I don't even know that they know it. It was much like I was sharing with you about meeting, and talking with those people that I saw some upward mobility in their career path and talking to them. For years, I would promote people and assume that their battalion chief would bring them in, and talk to them.
Right.
It took me years to go, it's not micromanaging for the fire chief to bring in the company officer, even though that's a couple of ranks.
Feels like a level jump, but.
Well, and just looking at a company officer in the eye and saying, hey, from the bottom of my heart, your job's way more important than mine. Like, whether people leave this organization, could people leave from me? Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's probably people that think I'm a jerk. But by and large, they're going to leave because of your inadequacies or the fact that they don't feel connected to you. Like, you will make or break this job. And I don't know if that would probably be another one of those wishes. I'd allocate the company officership.
Yeah. A bunch of years ago, we looked at roving and how the roving firefighter is an effect on high risk work groups. And that transient employee suffers in the organization, and the companies that have a vacancy and have a transient employee come in are measurably less effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yet, and this is a real problem for large organizations, is the model to staff uses rovers like crazy. And so that is a recipe for disconnection, right? You have, and in my previous agency in the PFD, they would have guys reporting to me that they had roved for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, how do you feel connected? I had a kid tell me, and this broke my heart. He says, I have never been to a barbecue. I don't get invited because I'm just the dude visiting for the day.
Yeah.
He goes, and of course, I've had some people say really shitty things like, well, that's that guy's fault because he's a freaking weirdo. And I say, well, hey, man, he may be a weirdo, but he's our weirdo.
Yeah.
So get out of your way, man. So we have to do things to deliberately connect people. And I don't know if that's, my idea, say make the pool smaller. So if you're going to rove, they rove in a small area. And I look at like smaller organizations like, Buckeye where I work now, smaller organization. Everybody knows everybody and probably knows family as well. So if you stay on a shift and you happen to be roved around, you're the rover on that shift. You everywhere you go, you know somebody.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't get invited to the barbecue, it's legitimately because you're a weirdo, then, right?
That's probably true.
Yeah,
that's probably true. I'm not going to name names, but it's a thing. So yes, that's a reality. So,
well, it's funny that you bring up the travelers and the rovers because that's you think about the people we put in those positions. Right, we put generally the most junior people, and I always noticed that. I probably could have done something to fix it, but I noticed that it was like there were two groups of firefighters. Like you would exit the academy, and there would be those that would seemingly get a home, and they would like never move.
Right, and
again, you can predict the outcome with those firefighters. Those people that get a home and they don't move, they're probably loved, but because they'll get shipped out if they don't like them. They'll find and there's a few that had a little ping pong nature to it. But there were just some of those people that were, as you say it, they were transient. They were rovers. 10 years seems excessive to never find a good permanent hole to work in. But I think that was much more palatable for the fire service to kind of just go, that's just the way we do business. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago.
Yep.
Today, I think we have to have some level of engagement about, man, do we need to look at who these people are roving?
Yeah. Well, I think that's when you consider the mental health issues that plague our folks, the need to feel connected to the organization. Mm-hmm. I read not too long ago in the Harvard Business Review, they talk about the number one reason why people leave organizations early is toxic workplace. And what is that really? It's disconnection, right? And human beings need connection. And it's one of the things I thought, as a firefighter, this is what we do, right? It's about people. It's about our people. So that's a thread that needs to be pulled on, is how do we create connection for transient people and for the organization as a whole? It's tough. I will say that kid who said he was 10 years, he did promote in the middle of that to engineer. So he was roving as a firefighter. Then he promoted. Now he's roving as an engineer. So kept on keeping on.
Perpetually homeless.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. And I struggle with I think the job's supposed to be tough. I think the job's supposed to be, it's not about the individual, but at the same time, it's like, man, I think we just got to start caring about those individual firefighters a little bit more. Like, it is a system-wide issue. I mean, take recruitment and retention out of it. Like, I don't know that we've solved anything there, but look at the overtime, right? Look at who's working overtime. And there's reasons. I mean, and I don't care. I don't care if it's Red Dirt, Montana, the city of New York. I guarantee you that the people working the overtime are who? Who were they in Phoenix? So who are they in Buckeye? Were they the people most senior?
No, it's the guys trying to put bread on the table. Right? Which, interestingly enough, one of the things that I'm hearing these young firefighters talk about, the 5 and unders we were talking about, is in the areas that we were talking, these guys can't afford a home.
Yeah.
So there's parts of Arizona where the local firefighters can't afford to live in the place they serve, and they're traveling 100 miles away to work and come in to work from where they live. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The markets are tough.
Jake and I were talking about that earlier today, that it's I don't envy anybody. We could double everybody's salary.
Yeah.
You could you could just do these absurd things, and it's like, I still don't know that we're closing the gap. And to further kind of expand on that, I've noticed that, and this is more anecdotal, but it doesn't seem like second jobs are as common. Like, it seems like there's more and more firefighters who, I think that's kind of good. I think that says something about our profession that that we want to say, I should be able to work a job. We don't expect that necessarily of other occupations.
Right.
But at the same time, if we're having trouble affording a home, and now people are kind of focused on us, like, it's not the best ingredients for a solution either.
Right.
It's just a different world.
You shouldn't have to be living off overtime to pay make your ends meet. That's not healthy. So if you could turn around and talk to 20-year-old Tom, what would you tell him?
Ooh, man, I don't know. There's not. That's one of the better questions I've had in a while. I think that what I would tell Tom that's 20 years old is that I'd take better care of myself physically. Like, I managed to always escape anything physically harmful. I've always felt like I had a real good mental foundation, like a healthy way to cope with things that were either untimely or unnatural that I encountered. But especially as a chief, you notice a lot of people that are really good when they're on the line, that exercise, that take care of their bodies and pay attention to what they eat. And I think if I had to tell myself at 20 anything, it would be that your metabolism doesn't last forever, and that you can't just assume that you're always going to be in some healthy range, and that's probably the most, everything else you're going to kind of Forrest Gump your way through life, right? Like, you're just going to have to figure some stuff out as you go, whether that's formal education, informal education, mentorship.
Yeah.
But one thing I don't think we sometimes do a real good job engaging people is talking about eating right, talking about physical health. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I remember waking up one day and thinking, like, wow, Jenkins, this is not what you used to look like,
Yeah.
And that's that. If I look back now, it's like, man, if I would have made really, really small changes then, I would have been better off, and I wouldn't have had to. And I never got that. I mean, I've never been that big and all that stuff. But boy, I really wish I would have paid attention better. That would have been what I would tell get to the gym a little bit more. Right.
It's easy. I find that when you get into staff, it's easy to find yourself not working out. There's a lot of things that are pressing. Everything's pressing. Things I got to take care of. My first staff assignment, I worked in an old fire station, and right across the street was the new fire station. And my boss was like, "Hey, every day, take time for yourself to work out." Oh, okay. And I was putting in 10, 12-hour days, not working out, eating at my desk, and I gained 30 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
It was pathetic. And, I remember that starkly. And it's, people would think I still have that 30 pounds, and I do.
Hey, but it's not 60, right?
It could be way
Stop the problem.
It could be worse. That's all I'm saying. So, yeah, It is a real problem. And so
Oh gosh,
I'm glad you would tell you that to yourself. What do you do about it? You get to a certain age though, and then it becomes harder and harder and harder. It's just so tough.
It is. And yeah, I don't know. I've had this. I used to even tell staff guys, like, hey, like when you come to staff, like we're here for the firefighters is what I used to tell them.
Yeah.
And so if you want to exercise and work out, which is required by policy, just do it before or after work. And it wasn't until I got some blood work, and it wasn't even that bad. I think I was just, it shocked me that I could have cholesterol like 5 points higher than it should. It was nothing. But I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And then I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, hey, I used to be, I thought I used to look better than this.
Right.
And I look kind of chunky, I can do better. And that's we just don't talk about that enough. But I've mentioned it earlier, like that's, there's guys out there like Mark Bayshore, and, I know Michael Bryan up in Michigan owns he's a CrossFit guy. And there's inspiration out there where other women and men are taking good care of themselves. And I think in this business, that's something we got to do better of. It's not shaming anybody. It's just saying, hey, keep it up.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot to be said for the mitigation of stress and the things that we complain about that are problematic for us get resolved by taking care of yourself. Even if it's just, I used to run a lot, and running for me was like a moving meditation. That's amazing for your mind. So yeah, you got to take care of that stuff. I do want to touch on, you made a pivot in your retirement into your new job. And you're working for the National Fire Administration, or U.S. Fire Administration, sorry, and working specifically on a project, the NERIS project, which I think as I said earlier, is for the line firefighter. Like, dude, you got me working on you want me to talk about a reporting project, but I want you to explain like why it's important in the fire service that we collect data and how this tool helps us do these important things.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I managed to never be retired. Matter of fact, the reason I retired was I had an opportunity to work on this project, the National Emergency Response Information System, which is the new national system that will replace the traditional system that people are used to, called the National Fire Incident Reporting System. Not the sexiest of topics to most firefighters.
That's why we're going to keep it short, boss.
But it's the most essential. As a matter of fact, the project is so interesting. I work for UL Fire Safety Research Institute, and we are working on this. This is, USFA, as you mentioned. It's the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate's funded it. But ultimately, here's what it's all about. It's about having a system that collects information in a way that reduces the burden for firefighters. Like when firefighters are given something that they have to do that is easier, allows them to tell the story, I think they'll rise to the occasion and do it. Because everything we do, if we were going to go to a restaurant in a city that we had never been to before, we'd open up Yelp and we'd make decisions based on data. And if we're going to buy something, right, if you're going to buy anything of any consequence, right, online, you're going to read all the reviews, right, you're going to do all this research. We're data-driven people because we have it at our fingertips. And that's the way in which we have to make decisions about, risk in our communities, where we have it, what we need to do about it, about deployment, right? Where do we need more people? Where do we need more stations, concentration, distribution, staffing levels? And of course, also looking at performance, that having people there but not getting them out of the house, or having impediments to, travel times, those are issues, and we have to be able to do that. And more importantly, we have to be able to do it for all fire departments. And so this is no exaggeration. It's a project. Probably nothing could have torn me away from the fire department other than this, because very few opportunities you have to work for every fire department across the country, but this is one of them that we can help all those fire departments have more information about risk, deployment, performance, through creating a system that allows them, with as little burden as possible and as quick of time as possible, allows them to tell the story of what they're doing out there. Firefighters doing a lot of great work, and so we're working hard on the project, full-time gig.
Yeah, well, I went to that briefing today with you, and I came away thinking about how much easier it's going to be for our folks to input this information, and the other piece is the real-time or near real-time data collection, which is super cool because we try to make decisions at the speed of relevance. And if the data is old and dated, then it doesn't serve us very well. But so the most contemporary information we can have can help us make good decisions about stuff, which is pretty impressive. So it's,
we have to get it right. We've got to get it right for the fire service. We've not, updated and touched some of these subjects ever. I mean, just think about what we count. There's only two ways, as I pointed out today, that we really can assess the magnitude of a fire-related incident. One is the number of casualties, both firefighter and civilian, or some dollar loss, which, depending on the jurisdiction, is oftentimes very far from the truth. And so, what we have to do is start collecting information that is relevant to us. Like, did we do any rescues? Were people displaced in the fire? Like, are we contributing to the housing insecure population? And we just have so many good and reliable data sources that we can use to enhance that information. And so it's time for a facelift here. It's time to get the fire service engaged, and it's an exciting project. Not always what firefighters want to talk about, but it's probably what they should be.
Coming to a kitchen table near you.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you some rapid fire.
I love it.
Let me ask you some rapid fire questions. What is your favorite firehouse meal?
Spaghetti, oddly enough.
Meatballs?
Yeah, either way. I didn't like spaghetti until I was at the I know that sounds stupid. I didn't like it until I had it at the firehouse. And then my palate has probably benefited from two people in my life. Two entities. One's the fire service, the other one's my wife. Otherwise I'd probably be on, canned food.
Excellent.
Bachelor style.
Uh-huh. All right. What's one recommendation that you find yourself giving to people frequently?
One recommendation that I give I would say that most of the time I recommend that people be very slow to anger. That I think sometimes we find ourselves in situations where we're like, it's almost cool to be hypersensitive anymore, right? And maybe it's the ability to hide behind a keyboard, so to speak. I don't know what it is, but I try to impart as I can. I certainly try to practice it, as a stoic myself, is just be slow to anger, and have a long fuse, give people the benefit of the doubt, and, wherever possible, try to believe in the best in people, right? And be the last person to be convinced that they have malicious intent. That'll bite you in the ass sometimes, by the way, but, that slow to anger thing I think is good. That a little civility is not bad in the workplace and personal life.
I love it. All right, last question. So the title of the podcast is the Fireground Fitness Podcast. Okay. What does it mean to you to be fireground fit?
Man, that's a good one. So that's multifaceted. I think one we've covered, right? You got to be able to physically do the job. This is one part brain, one part brawn. And so that means that if you want to be fireground fit, then you have to be able to, walk the walk and talk the talk. And so in a literal context, that would mean that you got to be doing something for yourself physically every day. Like that's a commitment I made to myself. I travel a lot, so it's tough sometimes, but every day I try to make sure that, even as a retired firefighter, that I'm physically competent enough to be a good and contributing member of society and not a burden. And then I think the other part of that is, right, that brain muscle, is that neurological tissue up there is important that it gets exercised too. That if you're not using it, whether that's reading, whether that's audio books, whether that's your own research, whether you have to be always expanding that as well. And I think those things together probably contribute to good fireground fitness.
Right on. I love it. Well, Chief Jenkins, thank you so much.
Good to hang out with you.
Chatting, man.
That was
I appreciate
fun.
it.
That was fun.
Right on. Thank you.
That's all we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to our thoughts today. If you're enjoying this podcast, get on over to Apple Podcast, rate and review. That helps other folks find their way to the Fireground Fitness Podcast, and it's good for the show. Lastly, take the lessons you've learned here today, figure out how you can imbue them into your life and then make your career, your personal life better. Go on out there, get some.